M_interview $. Are you listening? Sorry if I scared you. Just want to say thank you for your review on iTunes and congratulations, you have won a 1-year subscription to my online Chinese course. So just send me an email. You can use the online contact form on my website and I will set you up for the membership. To those of you who are interested in improving your Chinese vocabulary, I highly recommend you to check out my Instagram account where I teach 1 Chinese word a day. So you can definitely improve your Chinese vocabulary. You can find me at Chinese Talk Ease on Instagram. Alright, now let's start the show. This is Journey to Chinese Fluency podcast, episode number 27.
Embarrassing moment, culture insights, proven methods to achieve Chinese fluency. Skip that learning curve with the Journey to Chinese Fluency podcast. Now, your host, Victor Yang.
Hello everyone, Victor Yang here and welcome to Journey to Chinese Fluency. Today I am joined by Imelda Lapthorne. Imelda is from Queensland, Australia, now living in Melbourne. She speaks English natively and she is also fluent in Chinese and Italian. Imelda has learned Chinese for more than 8 years. Now she is working in international education. Here's an interesting fact about Imelda. She loves traveling and she enjoys learning phrases in the local language. Well, now let's welcome our guest for today. 你好 Imelda, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be on the show.
Are you ready to share with us your journey to Chinese fluency?
Yes, I'd love to.
Awesome. So first of all, please feel free to tell us a bit more about yourself for the introduction.
Okay, sure. So I started studying Chinese when I was actually in primary school and I enjoyed it so much that I continued through high school as well as university. And no matter where I've worked in the world, I've been able to use Chinese, even when I was living in Italy. Doesn't matter where you travel, where you go, there's always Chinese restaurants or Chinese people that you'll meet, and you can definitely use it. So I found that Chinese has been a very useful language, not only for making friends, but also for work and just for enjoying a new culture.
So how did you start?
When I started, I was in grade 6, and it was the new language that the government had brought into the school system in Queensland.
Right.
So I was probably one of the first students, the first year levels that went through with Chinese. We only had 30-minute lesson once a week. So it wasn't that much to learn, but it was enough to get us interested in learning Chinese. I think we learned a few songs and we learned the numbers and we learned a few phrases, but yeah, it was good.
Right. So after you finish your primary school, did you continue learning that in your high school as well?
Yes. So when I was in high school, we were able to choose our language. So we could choose from Chinese or French or German.
Right.
And I decided that I would continue with Chinese. We had a very cool teacher. Actually, our teacher was from Australia, wasn't from China, but she had just come back from studying in China. And so she was able to tell us lots of funny stories about her experience in China. And it made me think, one day I must go to China. And that's what motivated me to keep studying.
Right, that's interesting. So after high school, did you continue learning Chinese in university or did you go straight to China?
During my first semester at university in Brisbane, there was an opportunity to apply for a scholarship. So I applied for a scholarship.
Right.
And at the end of the year, I was informed I won the scholarship. So I went to Beijing for 6 months.
Right. So you just went to Beijing to do like more of an exchange kind of study?
Yes, it was a university exchange, but during the time there, we just studied Chinese and Chinese culture. Right. And I guess we did a lot of traveling as well. Yeah, it was a great experience.
At what level was your Chinese when you traveled to Beijing?
I think my level was already quite good. While I was living in Brisbane at university, I had a flatmate who was from Taiwan. And she liked to speak Chinese to me because her English was very poor.
Right.
So I got to practice with her. So I could communicate. I could tell people what I wanted, where I wanted to go. I could buy bus tickets. For simple, like everyday conversations, I was fine.
Right. That's nice to have a roommate who can't speak English properly and who like to keep speaking Chinese to you. That's very convenient, isn't it?
Yes, I was very fortunate.
So you must study pretty hard in your high school to reach that conversational level.
Yes, I did study very hard. And also, after I finished grade 12, I actually did go to China for 3 weeks. I forgot about that. I went with my Chinese teacher. We just went to travel around, but we also did 2 weeks study in Beijing in the mornings.
Mm-hmm, right.
And I found that in that 3 weeks in China, my Chinese just improved amazingly. Before that, I could read and write okay, but I couldn't really speak at all because I had never had an experience speaking. So those 3 weeks, I was forced to speak. I was forced to speak for everything,
right? Even
just to buy a bottle of water or to buy, some dumplings, I had to speak Chinese. So when it's 24/7 every day for 3 weeks, it's amazing.
Wow. So did your teacher take you everywhere and force you to speak up?
Well, we were in different classes, so she wasn't with me. So in my class, I was with, I think, some Korean students.
Right.
And so they didn't speak English, so we were forced to speak Chinese in class.
Wow.
And the teacher didn't speak any English at all.
Right.
And then when we went out traveling, my teacher said, it's your turn to speak, not me. So,
wow.
Yeah, she made me speak Chinese.
That's interesting. Well, now let's talk about the motivation side of things. So when you started learning Chinese, what's the biggest motivation you had?
I think it was the desire that one day I would travel to China, and I thought it was an interesting language. Mm-hmm. My mum had studied French, and she always said that it was useful. And when she went to France, she got to speak French. And I thought, well, I want to be different, but also the same in that I want to be able to travel and I want to be able to communicate. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what motivated me.
Right. Well, interesting. Your mom speaks French. Does she speak French fluently?
She used to. She also lived there for some time, but that's many years ago. Mm-hmm.
Right. You didn't learn any French from her then?
I learned a little bit, but I have forgotten it.
Right. How come you speak fluent Italian?
Because I lived in Italy for a couple of years, and I think Italian is actually much easier than Chinese.
Right.
In terms of learning and listening. Obviously, the Italian grammar can be quite complicated. Mm-hmm. But while I was living and working in Italy, I took classes and I lived with an Italian family, so I learned very quickly.
Right. Well, now please share with us your method in learning Chinese. What's been the most effective technique or method that's been working for you?
I think in the beginning, it is a lot of hard work. I remember when I got to university and every Friday morning we had what they call 听写, listening and writing.
Yep.
And we would have to learn between 60 to 70 characters each week, but they would only test us on maybe 20. But we never knew which 20, so we have to learn all 70 each week.
Wow.
And that was very challenging. And I think at the end of that year, only the students who were really motivated passed and went on to the next year at university.
Right.
But after you reach a certain level, the characters became easier and more new words were just a different combination of the characters.
Yeah.
And I found that was quite exciting, learning new words like that. Like even, for example, the word for computer, 电脑, electric brain.
Yes.
I already knew the word electric, 电, and so it was just learning, one or two new words. So I found the language fascinating. But I think at the beginning it was that hard work of memorizing words. But then as soon as you had enough, then you could start communicating with people, you could start understanding things. And I found that that really motivated me to continue.
Yes.
Definitely going on a trip to China really helped because then you could say, all the things that I've been learning for the past few years, they are real. I can really speak to someone in Chinese and ask for a bus ticket or ask for a meal in a restaurant. One thing that our Chinese teacher did was every semester we went to a Chinese restaurant.
Right.
And she made us order in Chinese.
Wow.
So that was fun because we were rewarded with our, if we could ask in Chinese, we could get what we wanted.
Yeah.
And she also found a McDonald's restaurant that had a Chinese speaker in it. And she said that she arranged in advance that we would go and we were only allowed to order in Chinese. This was when I was in high school. So that was a lot of fun because everybody wanted to order, shu tiao for your French fries and your hanbao bao and these things. So that was fun. That was fun for kids. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I think my high school teacher was very good at encouraging us to learn because she always tried to bring in some games for us to play in the classroom. Mm-hmm. I remember one game was called Finding the KitKat, and she translated it is to 巧克力在哪里? So where's the chocolate? And we had to get into pairs, and we had to hide the chocolate somewhere in the classroom, and then we had to use only Chinese to direct our partner to find the chocolate.
Oh, that's interesting.
So we could say 往前走,往后走, 左走,右走, 在上面,在下面. So we could use like simple direction words, like I just said, like walk forward, walk backward, it's on top, it's underneath. And then we knew like the words for the furniture in the room. And I think that simple things like that are really, really good, especially when you're still a child, you're in high school or you're even in university. I think that can be a fun thing for adults. I think everybody likes a bit of chocolate, and it's a good reward for learning a few phrases. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very interesting way to learn because I guess the moral of the story is to make it fun.
Yes.
And you also get the reward. So there's definitely, I see a feedback loop there, to initially you have a goal, you set up a goal, you make it fun, you enjoy the process, and then at the end, you enjoy your reward.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Just one interesting thing I can think of, like when you're ordering things in Chinese, in a Chinese restaurant, do people get it wrong? I'm just wondering, like, you say something and then the waiter may interpret as something else and give you a totally different thing. Did that happen?
Well, I think when we were ordering in the Chinese restaurant in Brisbane, I think they were very good at guessing what we wanted.
Right.
I think we only knew about 5 or 4 different dishes.
Yeah.
So, but we did get a very interesting dessert, which I think we didn't expect.
Right.
But I definitely, when I have been in China, I have ordered a dish that was completely different from what I thought. That happened a lot, actually.
Right. Yeah, I remember one of my relatives telling me this story that they went to Russia once and then they sit down in a Russian restaurant. And then when they look at the menu, it's all in Russian. They couldn't understand anything. And then they just look at the price. They just order some cheaper ones because it was quite expensive restaurant. So they order quite a few cheap dishes. And then when the dish come, they're all soups. So that was pretty funny.
Yeah.
Well, so in terms of writing, basically you learn enough words to learn most of the Chinese radicals. And then after that, you will be really just combination of different radicals to make up new words. So that made it much easier after the initial stage, isn't it?
Yes. And at first, the characters, I didn't even recognize the different radicals, but it's not until you use them in different words, in different situations, that's when you can say, oh, I know that part, and then you can put it together.
Yeah, that's true. See, the interesting thing is like yesterday, or maybe the day before, I was chatting with a friend and we were talking about the Chinese characters. For all the money-related characters, if you think about it, for all the money-related characters, actually all come with the radical bei, which is shell, which is because initially the money, like originally the money in China is actually using shells to exchange rather than the paper note. So that's why all the Chinese characters related with money it has the character 北 in it. And the other thing is all the characters related with, for example, body parts, body organs, it has the radical 月, which is moon in it. I don't understand why it's moon. Anything related with body parts, pretty much like most of the organs come with the radical 月 in Chinese. I find that interesting as well. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, in terms of speaking and listening, what exactly did you do to, reach a fluent level?
I think the most important part was I was not afraid to make a mistake. Mm-hmm. And I was quite brave in always asking for, what I wanted. So if I was trying to go somewhere or needed help, I would walk up and ask somebody, right. How do I get here? How do I go there? I think that's the key, is to be brave. Because even if you try and you make a mistake, the Chinese people will not laugh at you. They will encourage you, and they will really try to guess what you're meaning and try to help you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Great. What about in terms of memorizing characters or memorizing Chinese words? Not necessarily writing, in terms of just memorizing the sound. How did you do that?
I think that actually comes with the characters. I found that if I learned a character with the sound and character with the sound, then I would remember better. I had some friends who didn't want to learn the reading and the writing at all. They just wanted to learn speaking. Mm-hmm. And they were having a lot of difficulty. And I said, sometimes actually the characters help you to remember the words or the combinations and things. If you learn them together, it actually, for me, it was a good help to have the characters and the words together. But I think I learned more in phrases and sentences instead of individual words. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Cool. So what have been your biggest challenge in learning Chinese, and how did you overcome it?
I think, one of the challenges, apart from characters, would probably have been the tones, because sometimes all the tones do seem very similar, especially mm-hmm. when you're beginning.
Yes.
But I think just practice, and also, again, speaking in phrases. So when you learn a set phrase, then you'll get the flow of the sentence. It will help you to remember the tones instead of just remembering one word, one tone, one word, one tone. That could be too difficult, I think, or too challenging.
That's a good point, because it depends on the phrase, the characters in. It can have slightly different pronunciation.
Yes.
Yeah. Did you have to deal with any accents or dialects?
Yes. I lived in Taiwan for a year, and in Taiwan they speak very different from Beijing.
Yes.
But I actually think it's good to learn and be exposed to different accents, because it does help you understand the language more.
That's true.
Even when I was living in Beijing, I had a ai, like a maid, who came from the Hunan province. Mm-hmm. And there were so many sounds she could not say. So it sounded like she was speaking Hunan dialect to me.
Right.
But she was actually speaking a Putonghua with a Hunan accent.
Wow.
So at first it was a little bit difficult, but she was always pointing at the things she was talking about. And so after a while, you actually get quite used to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's good to be exposed to the different accents.
That's true. I remember coming to Australia, listening to Australian accent, and also listening to British accent is all quite different from what I used to hear. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just hearing different English accents also helped me to improve my own understanding in English. So I guess it's the same if you're learning Chinese. Definitely hearing a lot of different accents and dialects can help you to be better at recognizing what people are saying.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So if you are to start learning Chinese from scratch all over again, how would you do it?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I would definitely set aside some time each day. I think it has to be every day, otherwise you'll forget. It's like learning how to play the piano. If you skip a day or skip a couple of days, you will definitely forget. And I would spend at least 20 minutes going over some characters and learning those words. One thing I didn't mention earlier was when I was at university, our textbooks also came with cassettes. So that's the old school.
Right.
So I used to listen to the cassette of the reading over and over again, at least sometimes just before going to bed, or sometimes when I was doing housework or something, or going on the bus. I would listen to the reading over and over again, and that helped me a lot with the sounds, the pronunciation, and getting the flow and the rhythm of the language.
Yeah, good point.
I would do that. I would definitely set aside some time every day. And I would definitely, after you get to a certain level, I would definitely go to China, even just for a holiday. I don't think I would go there if I had no foundation.
Right.
I do remember that there were some students who went to China when I was there, and they really had no foundation, and it was very frustrating for them.
Yes.
So I actually often had to translate for them, just for simple things like, where does she have to go to get this paper signed, or where does she have to go to do this? I think you really need to have the basics, and then when you get to China, you can really learn quickly. But if you don't have the basics, then it's very hard, I think, once you get there.
Yes. Right. So consistently learning, and once you pass the beginner level, get immersed in a Chinese environment, and that will speed things up.
Yeah, and there's a lot of Chinese students here in Australia, so I'm sure you could easily go to a university coffee shop and find someone and maybe offer to do a language exchange. And, for example, you spend half an hour in Chinese and then you spend half an hour in English.
Yes.
That's also a great way to practice a new language.
Definitely. Chinese love to do language exchange because lots of Chinese wants to learn English, to be honest. Like, English is super hard for Chinese. It's just like, Chinese is super hard for people from English speaking background. So definitely do a language exchange is a good idea.
Yeah, and it's always fun. I mean, you can have it over a glass of zhengzhu naicha, the pearl milk tea, or maybe one time they could go to a Western cafe, you could go to a Chinese cafe. So it's language and culture exchange. Yeah.
Yes. Great. Well, now please share with us an embarrassing or a funny moment when you were learning Chinese.
Well, this one is quite funny. I was my first trip to China, and I was with my teacher and some of her Chinese friends, and they had taken us to a dumpling restaurant. And I thought my Chinese chopstick skills were very good before that. But I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to show off my chopstick skills. So I picked up a dumpling, and it slipped and fell, boom, into the big bowl of soy sauce, and it went everywhere. Went on my clothes. Thankfully, it didn't go over my teacher or my friend's clothes, but the white tablecloth was not white anymore. And I was so embarrassed, and I didn't know what to do. I was like, oh, no. But at least they were very forgiving, and then they were like, oh, shall we get you a fork? And I was like, no, I don't want a fork. I'll just be careful.
Yeah, it is like a process, isn't it, to learn chopsticks?
Yes.
I wonder, how do people learn to use chopsticks? I can't even remember how I learned how to use chopsticks. I learned it like when I was super young. How do people normally learn how to use chopsticks?
I think you need to practice, and it can be very tiring at first.
That's true.
But I know when I was younger, every time we went to a Chinese restaurant, my mum would say, okay, we're going to a Chinese restaurant, you have to use chopsticks.
Right.
And so sometimes we would ask the waitress how to hold them properly. And I think we all thought it was a challenge to learn. So we would, force ourselves, and obviously we would make a mess, but we would eventually learn. Yeah.
Right. Cool. Well, now please share with us a success, a most rewarding moment after you have become fluent in Chinese.
Oh, I think there's a lot of rewarding moments. One thing is when you speak Chinese to someone when they're least expecting it. For example, when I was living in Italy, I went to a Chinese restaurant to order some takeaway for some friends. And I ordered in Chinese, and the boss was so impressed that he gave me the whole meal for free.
Wow.
So I thought that was very rewarding.
That's awesome.
Also, my first job was similar. I think they were looking for someone for maybe a lower level position, but when I went to the interview and I could see that they were looking for someone also for another position, I started speaking in Chinese to the boss who was there, and they were very impressed. So I was able to go to a second position and not to the bottom position. So that was a very rewarding feeling.
Awesome. Definitely very useful to be able to speak Chinese.
Yeah.
So what are you doing with your Chinese now?
So I still use my Chinese every day. I work in international education. So sometimes I have to look after Chinese students who are here in Australia, or sometimes I need to work with agents in China. And even though some of them do speak English, I find that for some of the details, it's just much easier to communicate in Chinese, and they appreciate that as well. So yeah, I use Chinese quite often.
So you talk Chinese with the students?
Yes, only if they have a problem, because they're here to learn English. So I try to speak to them mainly in English.
Right.
But if if there's a problem or something serious happens, then definitely communicate in Chinese. So make sure that they understand everything and try to help them to solve an issue or problem quickly.
That's nice. I'm sure the students are impressed.
Yes, I often surprise them.
So how would you compare your life before you've learned Chinese and your life after you've learned Chinese?
Oh, okay. I guess I started learning Chinese quite young, but I think the life after you have a second language or you have Chinese means that you can communicate with a lot more people. But I think also it just opens your mindset to understand your own language better. So I think in that regard, I would say maybe I feel more intelligent after learning Chinese.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah, I would say that. And also my mind is also, I guess, more open to new cultures. I think that really opened that up to me, and understanding that a language and a culture are really combined together.
Well, that's definitely true, because you raise a very good point. Learning a second language will make you more aware of the language you speak natively.
Yes.
We never think about how we speak until we start learning a second language. We'll realize, what language is constructed of, like how it is sounded, how it's constructed grammatically, and things like that, how we write characters, and, we become more aware of a language rather than just take it for granted.
That's true.
Yeah, definitely make you more intelligent. I feel more intelligent now.
You should.
Yeah. Well, now please share with us one special thing about the Chinese culture that is different to your own culture.
Oh, there's a lot of different things. One thing that I do like is that when you go to a Chinese friend's house, you have to take off your shoes, and they all give you some slippers to wear. Right. And they're also very good at offering you a cup of hot tea. I think this kind of traditional hospitality I really enjoyed. Also, I think they do look out for your friends. So they always make sure that you are warm and you're not cold. Yeah, I think in that regard, they're very good at taking care of visitors. And also always making sure you've got some food to eat, you're not hungry.
Yes.
It's very easy to get fat in China, actually, if you're not careful.
That's true. I always have friends going back to China, and after they come back, they'll just say, I just gained a lot of weight. I gained 10 kilograms or something.
Yes.
Yeah, because there's so much nice food in China that you can't get in Australia. And when people go back, they just kind of want to eat everything.
Yes. And if you are eating with friends, they also always want to put food on your plate and make sure you keep eating. And yes. If they notice that one of the dishes is your favorite dish, they will put it right next to you and make sure you eat more of it, or they'll order another one for you. So you eat too much.
That's right. And do you realize the other thing is, if you go out to eat with Chinese, especially in China, you always have leftovers. You never finish everything.
That is true. At least they let you take home the leftovers, so it's not wasted anymore.
Yes. I'm sure it's like some people, they just don't take leftovers. They don't do takeaway just because of the face.
Yeah, some people do that. And
Yes.
yeah, so it's not good to waste too much. But
That's right.
when I was living there, I did not mind taking it home. I would say I have no problem to take
That's a
it
good
home.
habit, definitely. Good way to promote, non-wasting.
Yes. Mhm.
Is there a tool, an app, or a website that you cannot live without in learning Chinese?
I haven't used many, but I know that my friends have found very good apps for children's stories, and also I think it's probably like even just in Google Translate where you can press the button and you can hear the sound. So if you type in a sentence, you
Right.
can press it and you can hear it. So I think these days there's a lot out there. Unfortunately, I haven't really used many of them, but definitely there are some really great ones out there.
Right. So you never use any like Chinese app or website?
No, but I use Chinese WeChat every day to chat with my friends, and we
Right.
always text in Chinese. So that's actually a very good way to keep up my Chinese characters.
Yeah, WeChat is definitely a very good app. I personally use WeChat every day.
Yes.
That's the Chinese social media, the most dominant Chinese social media.
Yes. And if you do go to China, you should really, or if you want to have Chinese friends, you should definitely download WeChat because they will all have WeChat and they think it's the best way to keep in touch with you.
That's right. You can't live without WeChat really. And, even you go on streets, you have to use WeChat to make payments and, to get discounts, to order food and everything on WeChat.
That's right. Now China has jumped way ahead of Australia in terms of online payments and using your smartphone to pay for things. So with
Yes.
your WeChat app, you can pay for anything, everything.
That's right. And people transfer money using WeChat. Here in Australia, we use bank transfer, but in China, people use WeChat transfer.
Yep.
So yeah, I even have some people asking me, some people have to pay me money like to Australia. They just ask me, can I pay you via WeChat? I was like, oh, well, my WeChat is not even linked to a bank account. Like, I don't know how to receive that money. But, definitely if you go to China, you have to have WeChat. Otherwise, you can't really communicate with people, can't do anything.
That's right. Yeah.
So if you are to recommend to our listeners one book in learning Chinese or the Chinese culture, what would that be?
I was just thinking about this earlier, and one thing that I enjoyed doing, and this was after I had a certain level of Chinese, was actually reading the Disney storybooks. So they have all kinds of stories, even Mulan or The Little Mermaid, these kind of books. So it's a familiar story to us in English. The books that I read had a bilingual option, so you could get a Chinese and English, and they also came with cassettes as well.
Right.
But I found that they were a good way for me to, I guess, stay interested, because once you learn and you're no longer in formal classes, you may find a textbook boring. But if you want to buy a set of these, you can buy Disney stories. That's what I liked. And you just go through and you can learn a lot of new words that you wouldn't actually find in your textbooks.
Right.
So I think that if you just want to learn for fun and you've already got a level of Chinese, a basic level, it's an interesting way to learn, and you can read the stories. If you have children at home, you can read to them, or you can just read by yourself and learn the few new words each time and try to remember them. Yeah.
Great recommendation. So now this is your chance to teach our listeners your favorite Chinese quote, phrase, or expression.
Okay, I have a few, but one that I actually do use quite a lot, it is 吃以前长以智. It is, I guess the English equivalent means learning through experience, but I actually like the Chinese words much more. I think they have much more powerful impact than this learn through experience, because to me it means you have done something, but maybe what you did wasn't good or whatever, but you will gain some experience from that. You'll gain some knowledge through it. And I think that's something that I try to teach my students at school. Maybe they've done something wrong, or they have a consequence for one of their actions, and they might be I don't want the consequence. I want my this or that. But through this phrase, I say, well, you know that if you did this, you've learned a lesson now. So next time you won't do it again.
Yes.
Yeah, I really like that phrase.
Yeah, I like this phrase. I really like this phrase. I use this very often as well. This is very commonly used Chinese phrase, 吃一堑长一智. Well, let me just break it down a little bit for our audience. So 吃一堑, so 吃, which literally means eat. But in this case, it actually means you got, right? Yi in this case is one, right? And 堑, which is kind of like you made a fall, you made a mistake. So 吃一堑, which means you basically got hit on your head, basically, right? And 长, which means you grow. And yi, once again, it means one. And 智 is wisdom. So you grow one wisdom. So, right, you got hit on your head once, you grow your wisdom. So 吃一堑长一智, there you go. So I really like this phrase. And I've been telling this to my kid as well. So yeah, definitely worth learning this.
It's a great phrase. Yep.
Well, now, if you are to give our listeners one single piece of parting advice in learning Chinese, what would that be?
I think keep at it. Don't give up. Definitely find some Chinese friends so you can practice with them. And definitely plan a trip to China as a reward. And that can also be your motivation.
Fantastic advice. This has been a recurring theme in our show. Most of our guests has been recommending this, pretty much the same. So almost every single guest will say, just keep doing it, be consistent, just persevere. And once you pass the beginner stage, travel to China, get yourself immersed in a Chinese environment. And that's, the fastest way for you to learn, to move forward.
Yes. And you'll feel great satisfaction. If you put in the work and you go there and you can use the language, you feel great satisfaction.
That's right. So make it into a feedback loop once again. So I guess the theme for this, episode is really learn Chinese and make it fun and then be rewarded. And that way you can keep learning, always motivated, and you improve faster because you enjoy it.
Yes.
Well, so now, just before we let you go, Imelda, how can our listeners reach you?
How can they reach me? Well, they could contact you, and if you want to pass on my email address, that's fine. If they have any specific questions.
Sure. All right. Well, no worries. Thank you so much, Imelda, for coming on our show today and sharing with our listeners your journey to Chinese fluency. It's great to have you here today with us.
You're welcome. It has been an enjoyable interview.
To our listeners, the show note is now available at ChineseTalkEase.com/27. TalkEase is spelled as TALKEZE. Do you want to learn Chinese for free? Start your own journey to Chinese fluency with my video lessons at ChineseTalkEase.com. TalkEase is spelled as TALKEZE. Also remember to join our Facebook group. Just head over to TalkChineseCommunity.com. If you have enjoyed the show, please leave us a review on iTunes. Each month, I will choose one reviewer and give out a 1-year subscription to all my premium video lessons for free. That's it for now. I'll see you in the next episode.